Okay, so I have finally decided to put my butt down on the chair and to record this podcast. So, welcome to episode one of Permission to Fall Apart. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Mariska, and if you're listening to this, chances are that you've either fallen apart before, you're falling apart right now, or you are trying really hard not to. And for a long time, I thought falling apart was something that happened to other people or things that you see happen on movies. And I never thought that it is something that would actually happen to me. Um, I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I stayed positive, if I kept finding my magic in every day, if I helped enough people, I could just be like a good person and live a normal life, um, which didn't quite happen in the way that I thought it would. So life has a way of teaching us lessons that we have never signed up for. And this podcast was born from probably one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn. I say lesson, but actually it's a lot of mini lessons I think that I've learned. And yeah, I just want to share my experience with all of you. Um, but just know that I don't have all the answers and I'm not a therapist and I definitely haven't figured everything out and my ducks are not in a row. They're actually like maybe, I don't know, running around somewhere. Um, but I have learned that sometimes the strongest thing we can do in difficult situations is like admit that we are actually struggling and maybe it's time that we also give other people the permission to kind of like do the same and to be like, hey, it's okay if you are struggling and it's okay if you're not okay. There's that thing that always pops up over Instagram, which like, it's okay not to be okay. And I think that is such a strong quote because it's so true. Um, so basically the name of the podcast is Permission to Fall Apart. And honestly, I wish people made me feel like when I went through my difficult stage, I wish people gave me the space to really fall apart. But I think that with society, with culture, with Christianity, all of these things had a bigger effect on me than I actually thought it would. And I think I had this pressure on me to pretend that I'm okay all the time. And I didn't have the space to really go like, crap, like I'm actually not good. And I eventually got to that point and I got the help that I needed, but kind of wish I did that a little bit sooner. So yeah, the permission to fall apart comes from a lot of different things. It's like, we live in a world where everybody seems to be okay all the time. I mean, if you just look at social media, um, social media is filled with smiling photos and beautiful travel pictures and motivational quotes. And it's so carefully edited. And I think that, you know, yes, we don't want to see you crying and we don't want to see you like fighting with your partner, for example. But I think it kind of conditioned us to keep pretending that everything is okay in our lives. So, what happens when our reality doesn't actually look like that, right? What happens when you actually like exhausted, when you're heartbroken, when you feel anxious, when you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders and you literally can't handle it anymore? And what happens when you wake up one day and you realize that you cannot hold yourself together anymore? So a lot of us hide those feelings and we tell people, "Oh, we're fine, everything is great," and we keep going and we keep performing and we keep smiling. Um, because I think somewhere in either our culture, somewhere in our culture or somewhere in our society, like falling apart equals failure. And I've really learned that it doesn't. Like, falling apart doesn't mean that you're failing at life. I think falling apart, I've seen it as this beautiful thing where it's actually like the beginning of a new journey. And maybe falling apart and breaking opens up those cracks of light that has to eventually like shine through, right? So sometimes when we stop pretending and when you face what has been hurting you, that is actually when the biggest healing starts. And that's where the biggest healing started for me. Um, so yeah, just to give you a little bit like like in a nutshell or like a brief history of what I went through. A few years ago, I found myself in a relationship that basically completely changed my life. So, a few years ago, I loved somebody very deeply, and this person started to struggle with severe mental health challenges. And eventually, those struggles escalated, and eventually, it turned into psychosis and a very serious mental breakdown. Um, Now, if you have never witnessed psychosis, thank goodness, because it is a very scary experience and probably one of the most scariest things I've ever experienced in my whole life. It was sometimes it still actually feels like I was in some weird movie or like some dream, and sometimes, some days I'm completely delusional and I'm like, oh, that never happened to me, but actually it did. But psychosis in a nutshell is kind of like you see the person that you know, like they look the same, they dress the same, but like it's not them. The person that you know is not actually inside this body anymore. Um, and everything becomes very unpredictable. Everything becomes very confusing. Everything becomes very scary. Um, I will give you an example. Like, I remember, there was this one moment where, um, this person was like standing outside and it started to rain and they looked at me and they were like, I can control the weather and I just did this. And I was like, oh, haha, that's so funny. And then they looked at me and their eyes were like so scary and so dark. And they looked at me and they were like kind of telling me like that they can control things. And in that moment, I felt like kind of like this shiver go down my spine. And it's so weird because this person is somebody I trusted for many years and I loved for many years, but suddenly it's like a completely different person standing in front of you. So there were a lot of things, and I will go deeper into another episode of exactly like kind of what the psychosis was and what happened, and maybe some signs that you can look out for. But yeah, eventually you become so emotionally exhausting because you don't know what's going to happen in the next second. Like, how are they going to act? What are they going to say? Um, and I spent a long time trying to kind of help this person, trying to support them in the best way I knew at that time. I was trying to understand, so I was like up at night trying to read up on things of what I can do and Google things, and yeah, I was just kind of trying to hold everything together. But honestly, it was like I was carrying water in my hands because everything was just slipping. And if you've ever tried to carry water, I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing. Like you can't carry water in your hands because it's just gonna slip through your fingers. And I think that's kind of how my life started feeling. Like I was trying to catch little droplets of water here and there, and everything just fell to the floor. But when you love someone, or at least when I thought I loved someone, you know, I was trying to do all of these things and it eventually completely broke me because one thing, one very painful truth that I've probably learned through this whole experience that I went through is you can't save someone from drowning if you are already drowning yourself, right? Like that's not going to work. Like you need to save yourself in order to save somebody else. And somewhere in this whole process, I completely lost myself. I completely fell apart because I was so focused on this other person, focused on getting them the help and the therapy and the medication and all of these things that I stopped looking after myself. I stopped looking in the mirror. I stopped, like, little things started to happen where I didn't even care about how I dressed anymore. I didn't care about my hair. I didn't care about my appearance. I didn't care about anything but this person because I was like, okay, I need to save them. Um, so I stopped asking myself how I was doing and I stopped checking in with myself. And I didn't realize how exhausted I was, because I was quietly sinking. And eventually I fell apart. And it wasn't like this dramatic scene where, I fell to the floor and I was crying and I was, screaming. It happened very slowly, like day by day. You start losing little pieces of who you are. And I think a lot of people go through the same experience where, you start feeling like, oh, like I'm feeling a little bit more anxious all of a sudden. Or you're like, oh, I haven't seen my friends for like 5 months. That's not like me. Or, I'm feeling like so lonely all of a sudden. Or you're feeling tired and you just want to sleep every day. Like, until it hit me one day where I was like, wait a minute, like, I don't actually know who I am, what I'm doing. And I realized that I haven't actually been okay for a long time. And I think the biggest thing that surprised me throughout this experience wasn't really the fact that I was struggling with anxiety and confusion and all of these things. I think the thing that kind of shocked me the most was how ashamed I feel about it. Like, I felt like, okay, I should have been able to handle this. Like, it's just another person. Like, why can't I handle it? And why can't I be stronger? People are always like, oh, just be strong. And like, why couldn't I be stronger? And why couldn't I have things figured out? And why didn't I see this sign? And why didn't I see that sign? And why didn't I listen to this red flag? And, and at the end of the day, I also realized that there's no way that you can figure all of these things out, right? We all carry like these invisible battles inside of us, and it's okay. Like, we handled it at that stage and at that time in the best way that we knew how and in the capacity that we had, right? So I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace and go like, okay, well, at least we did come to the realization that something is wrong. And I just want you to know that if you're going through something very similar, like, you don't have to feel ashamed. So, if there's one thing that you take away from this first episode, is that you don't need to feel ashamed. You need to give yourself permission to feel what you need to feel. You need to give yourself permission to go through things, to work through your emotions. And you are a human being, and being human is like enough right now. So, yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say. Like, I want to open up this discussion to talk about these things because I think, um, especially if you are in the Afrikaans culture, there's a lot of stigma around going to therapy. There's a lot of things around, falling apart, like admitting that you need help, like, because we always need to be very strong. And that's how that's kind of what people tell us to do since we were very young. It's like, you just have to be strong, don't show your emotions. And I think we were never taught really like how to just be a normal human being. So I just want to open up the conversation about mental health, relationships, starting over, boundaries, healing, all of these things, because honestly, healing is also not just going to happen overnight. It's a long process, and it's taken me a long time to get to where I am. And I still struggle. There are still moments where I get triggered by things. There are still things, that I need to deal with. But I feel like if I talk about it to people, maybe they understand why I do the things that I do. And maybe that is going to eventually heal all of us. Like if we just can talk about it and give other people the permission to be who they are. So, yeah. So, before I end the episode, I want to ask you a question, and that is, what part of your life are you pretending is okay right now? Right? What is that part that you're not showing everybody, that you're not posting online, that you're not talking about? So, what is actually going on for you? And what would happen if you talked about it to somebody or if you reached out? How would that change you? So, yeah, maybe that's where healing starts, is when we actually start talking more about these things. And maybe it won't fix anything, but maybe it can fix us a little bit, right? So, yeah, so thank you for being here and thank you for listening. And I hope that you will join me in the next episode.